Hello and welcome to another video from the only channel you need to not only survive the current apocalypse but actually enjoy it. And today's video is going to be the final installment in my Angels and Men video series. Now, it's been over a year since I promised that I would do that, and the reason I didn't do it is because it wasn't originally planned. The series as it stands was the entire series as I meant for it to be. I had no intention of adding this final part. Because even though I was aware of the information, I didn't want to talk about it because I know that it's hard to tell somebody something that is completely the opposite of everything they've ever been taught before. Whether it's the truth or not, it doesn't make any difference. People don't want to hear it. And I guess another part of it is that I don't like doing videos until I have every single piece of information straight in my head. And with this particular subject, I don't. You know, there's a lot that I understand, but it actually leaves me with more questions than answers, the information that I know. So we're going to just talk about this a little bit. In the Bible, there's a book called Malachi. And we're told, by every church, or if you have a Bible, like, I'm not even going to show you. When you go to the book of Malachi in one of my Bibles, it says that Malachi was a prophet, and he lived around such and such a century, and he would have been a contemporary of such and such other prophets. Well, that's all just conjecture. There's absolutely nothing in the Bible to support that. When you read a book, like this is an example, Jonah, you look at the book of Jonah and you think, well, this is a fictional story. It's about a man getting swallowed by a fish. That never happened. So it must just be there to teach us some kind of special lesson. But if you read the whole Bible, you'll see several references to Jonah by real living people speaking of Jonah as if he is a real person. And in fact, he's in part of at least one of the genealogies in the Bible. So, you know, fictional people don't have real parents and real children. They have fictional parents and fictional children, and since that's not the case, we have to accept that Jonah really was a person. But with Malachi, there isn't any reference anywhere in the Bible of anybody ever having been named Malachi. In fact, I mean, I'm not saying you couldn't just choose to name somebody anything you wanted them, but Malachi very specifically means the angel of the Lord, or the angels of the Lord. It's an actual word, so I think it should just be translated as a word, since we don't have any indication anywhere in the Bible that that word was ever used as a proper name. If you look at the book, there isn't a whole lot of information in there that we need for this particular subject till you get to the very end. I mean, it's a lot of messages to the nation of Israel. You know, why have you done these terrible things? And then the people of Israel say, well, how did we do those things? And you did that by when you did the such and such act. So the people are being reminded of all the bad things they've done in repayment to God for all the good things he's done for them. But at the end it says, in the last days I will send Elijah the prophet. Now Elijah was dead. He's still dead. You know, he was a human being as far as we know, and he had real parents. So he wasn't just like an angel that came to earth in spirit. He was a fleshly person that was born from a human being. But when we get to the New Testament, John the Baptist is asked, are you Elijah? And he says, no, I'm not Elijah. But then later the apostles are speaking to Jesus about Elijah. They say, well, why do our teachers tell us that Elijah will come in the last days? And so they probably were unaware that at the end of the book of Malachi it says that in the last days Elijah would come. So Jesus tells them that if you can listen to it, if you can understand this, John the Baptist is Elijah. Now, so who's telling the truth? John the Baptist denied being Elijah, but Jesus said, in fact, he was Elijah. Well, we're going to go back in history to an event that we've already spoken about in this series, where Abraham is sitting in front of his tent and he sees three men. And these men come to him and talk to him, and apparently Abraham was shocked to see them, and he was excited, so he prepares this elaborate meal for them, and they consume the meal. So they're in some fleshly form, but they they can't just be men because it refers to one of the men as Jehovah. And Jehovah speaks to the other two men. He says, you know, I hear some bad things are happening in Sodom. Could you go check it out for me, see what's going on? So the other two men leave. Well, the one that's called Jehovah stays with Abraham. The other two go to Sodom. And this is the story where Abraham talks God into allowing the good people of Sodom to come out. Well, the only good people there are Lot and his family. So these angels wrestle about with these people, you know, verbally. They finally convince them they've got to leave. So Lot and his family leave, and these men call down fire and sulfur onto the cities of that region. You know, no cities were allowed to be built in the Promised Land, and here's, I think, 5 of them. You know, so Sodom and Gomorrah and several other cities, and one, Zoar, doesn't get destroyed because Lot talks him into leaving it, which he later regrets. But getting back to our story, it's very obvious that these are not, you know, mortal human beings. They are angels, and yet they eat food. So we go a little further along in the story, and we get to the days of Moses. And Moses is taking the nation of Israel out of Egypt and bringing them into the Promised Land. So they get right there before the Promised Land and say, okay, what we're going to do, we're going to send out 12 men to spy out the land. And so these 12 men go into the Promised Land. They go all around, and they come back with reports. Well, 10 of them lie. They're just liars. And it's, you know, in our English Bibles it says 10 bring a bad report. Well, that makes you think that it's just bad news. It's not bad news. It's a false report. That's the word. It's a false report. They tell them, no, you can't go in there. These are really, really bad. Well, 2 of the spies, Joshua and Caleb, say, there's no way. God split the Red Sea. We came through here. He got us water out of a rock. He fed us manna from heaven, and you're going to worry about this people? They can't stop us. We can go in there. So because the people wouldn't go in, God doesn't allow them into the Promised Land. He tells them you're going to have to wander around for 40 years because you spied out the land for 40 days. You come back with lies. And so for your 40 days of spying out the land, you're going to get 40 years of wandering in the wilderness. Now, the ones who didn't go along with this, the ones that were telling the truth, Joshua and Caleb, were still alive at the end of the 40 years, but all the rest of them died. Well, when the 40 years is up, Moses has been replaced by Joshua, one of the original spies. And then now it's Joshua's turn to take these people into the Promised Land. And so this time around, he doesn't send out 12 spies, he only sends out 2. And the 2 spies come back with a good report. They go in and they destroy Jericho, and they enter the Promised Land. So there's an occasion where you've got 2 spies again, just like, or 2 messengers again. But these are humans. These are obviously humans. Joshua and Caleb are human beings. Once again, they have their lineage recorded in the Bible, so we know they had parents and children. They're real people. Well, if we go forward even to even more recent times, in the New Testament there is another story, and it involves angels. With the Old Testament, it's very difficult to determine who is an angel and who is a human, because the word we use for angel actually means messenger. And in the Hebrew portion of the Bible, the Old Testament, if you see the word messenger, you have to use your head to determine if it's a spirit messenger or a fleshly messenger. In other words, is it an angel or is it a man? Because in the Hebrew language, there was not 2 separate words for messenger. If it was a messenger, it didn't matter if they were an angel or a human. But when you get to the Greek portion of the Bible, the New Testament, there are 2 separate words. And those words are angelos, which we translate as angel, and the other one is apostole, which we translate as apostle. So you have a very clearly defined difference between fleshly messengers, which are apostles, and spirit messengers, which are called angels. So, in the Bible, in the New Testament, there are quite a few references to angels and quite a few references to humans, messengers, and we know who they are because 2 different words, with one exception. John the Baptist, once again, remember Jesus said John the Baptist was Elijah, even though John the Baptist said he was not Elijah. When John the Baptist baptized Jesus, he instantly recognizes Jesus is the Messiah. He says, I can't do this. I can't baptize you. You know, I'm not even fit to take your sandals off. And Jesus says, yeah, well, I know, but for right now, we need to do it this way for the people to see. And so John the Baptist baptizes Jesus. He obviously knows Jesus is the Messiah. Well, a couple of years later, John the Baptist is in prison, and he sends two men to ask Jesus, are you the Messiah, or should we be looking for someone else? But it very specifically says that those two men are angels, not fleshly messengers, spirit messengers, and it very clearly says that John the Baptist is an angel, not a messenger. But once again, we know that John the Baptist was a human because, you know, at the very early parts of the New Testament, Gabriel the angel goes to his parents and says, you're going to give birth to a son, and you're going to call him John. A fleshly, living, and it actually, not just that his mother was going to give birth to John, but tells John's father, you're going to be the father of this man. So he was a fleshly person. So why would Jesus say that he was Elijah? Well, remember, in the Bible there are good angels and bad angels, and as humans we think of them as angels and demons. So what do we know about demons that is undeniable? Well, we know that demons can possess somebody. So what's the difference between a good angel and a bad angel? Good angels are good. Bad angels are bad. Other than that, there is no difference. It's like, you know, we're not talking about the difference between dogs and cats. These, if we were to categorize angels as anything, we would call them a species, an individual species. As far as we know, there isn't anything in the Bible to say that certain angels are a different species than other angels. Although, you know, we don't know. But if a bad angel can possess someone, why couldn't a good angel possess someone? And if the angel that possessed Elijah was the same angel that possessed John the Baptist, then Jesus would be correct when he said that Elijah was John the Baptist. And John the Baptist would be correct in saying that he was not Elijah. I hope you're understanding what I'm saying. Now there's another, and don't just turn this video off, because I'm going to explain things in a way that will make it a little easier to digest. When Jesus, excuse me, when Jesus cast out angels, the apostles asked him about it, and they said, well, you know, it may have been a good thing to cast out that demon, but what difference does it make? If this guy doesn't take in a good spirit, a clean spirit, then that dirty spirit is going to go out and he's going to wander around for a while. He's going to meet up with some of his friends and he's going to say, you know what, if you haven't got a place to stay, the place I just left has been cleaned up. All of us could go back there together. And we know that more than one angel can possess somebody because, you know, Legion, that's what he said. Jesus said, well, you know, what's your name? He goes, my name is Legion, because there's a whole lot of us in here. And so, even though demon possession sounds like a violation, it actually is part of a personal choice. Jesus tells these people, you know, he tells them that people that don't take in a good spirit are going to have to take in a bad spirit. Well, it's the same thing with a good angel. You know, if you choose to have a good angel influence you, you can take them in. Doesn't mean they're going to stay there all the time. You know, there's nothing to indicate that when John was born, this angel was in him and it never left. He may have just been like a guardian angel watching over John as he was growing up. Maybe, you know, occasionally going into his mind and influencing him or teaching him. But I don't think it's the same thing as being forced to have this spirit. You know, John, it really sounds to me like in order for John to be possessed by this good angel, that he had to choose to be possessed by this good angel. So it's not a violation. Don't think of it that way. Now I feel completely justified in telling you the things I just told you, because even though the things I'm telling you are not spelled out word for word the same as what I'm telling you word for word, the evidence is there, and what I just told you makes perfect sense. and does not cause the Bible to contradict itself, whereas the church's version of what I just told you does cause the Bible to contradict itself and doesn't make sense. And you can't deny the repeating pattern that's happening over and over in the Bible and think that that's just coincidence. When Abraham saw those three men, and one of the men said, I am Yahweh, or Jehovah, and he tells the other two men, go find out what's going on in Sodom. You have to understand that God knew what was going on in Sodom. Why would he send spies to find out what was going on in Sodom? Later, when Joshua sends two spies into Jericho and asks them to find out what's going on in Jericho, it's very obvious from the account that Joshua knows what's going on in Jericho. He doesn't have to send spies out to find out what's going on in Jericho. And it's the same thing with John the Baptist. When John the Baptist sends out two spies to find out if Jesus is the Messiah, it's very obvious from the Bible that John the Baptist already knew that Jesus was the Messiah. So this is a very easy to see, undeniable repeating pattern. Now, there are other instances in the Bible that I'm about to tell you about that are closely related to this, but they don't follow that repeating pattern. When Jesus was transfigured, he took several of his apostles up and he entered into what's called the cloud. And when they get in there, they see Elijah and Moses. So if this repeating pattern is the same angels, and let's just think for a moment that perhaps they are, then we know that Elijah is one of those angels, because back in Elijah's day, Elijah was Elijah. Jesus very clearly said that in his day, John the Baptist was Elijah, and Malachi very clearly says that Elijah would come before the great and fear-inspiring day of Jehovah. So that particular angel is caught in this repeating pattern. Since we're able to recognize that this angel that's referred to as Elijah seems to be caught up in a repeating pattern, and we know that he is involved in this pattern with other angels, and we know that he appeared in the Transfiguration with Jesus and Moses, then we can assume that the angel that influenced Moses was perhaps caught up in this repeating pattern as well. And since Jesus was in there, he also would be part of this repeating pattern. Now, there are other instances in the Bible where you will see individuals that seem to be doing the same thing that had been done previously by other individuals and were also done later by other individuals. Just keep in mind that this repeating pattern is not just happening as some kind of coincidence. It's being orchestrated probably by these angels. Everything in the Bible is important, but when things are very, very important, they are repeated over and over again. So we need to ask ourselves, why is this repeating pattern in the Bible? And Paul gave us a big hint as to what was going on. He said, I feel that we, the apostles, are the last actors in this great theatrical spectacle for angels and men. So Paul was acknowledging that what he was doing was being influenced by outside sources. And he was doing what I like to call a reenactment or a pre-enactment of something very important. And the reenactment may have been of something that involved the angels prior to the flood, or something involving angels right at that moment that we couldn't see because angels are invisible to us now, or it's something that we can't see because it hasn't happened yet. So we can look at this pattern that's set up by these two and see if they point to something from the past or something to the future. In the future, the book of Revelation says that my two witnesses are going to be killed on the Broadway, that in a spiritual sense is Egypt and Sodom and the place where our Lord was killed. And there's a lot of speculation about who these two prophets are, but the Bible very clearly says that the two prophets are the two oil lamps and the two olive trees. Earlier in the book of Revelation, it spoke of two oil lamps connected to two olive trees. Well, oil lamps run on olive oil, and if you have them connected to an olive tree, then you have an unending supply of light. Those two prophets that were killed on the Broadway but resurrected later are the sun and the moon, the two luminaries of the sky. So whatever has happened in the past, we'll find out one day when we get an opportunity to speak to the angels. And we'll be constantly reminded of this story every time we look into the sky at the sun and the moon. If you can accept what you just heard here as truth, or at least accept the possibility that what I'm telling you is truth, you're going to find as you read the Bible on your own that a lot of the scriptures that seemed very confusing in the past will now be quite clear. When Jesus said that John the Baptist was Elijah, we can accept that the Bible teaches reincarnation, which I promise you it does not, or we can accept that John the Baptist was being influenced by the same angel that originally influenced Elijah. We can also understand why John the Baptist would deny being Elijah while Jesus quite clearly said that he was. If we take into consideration the scripture that says, unbeknownst to themselves, some have entertained angels, then we can figure that probably John, at least for most of his life or part of his life, was unaware that he was being influenced by an angel. And he may have just thought, I've got to get out in the Jordan River and start baptizing people. Why would he think that? He would have to have gotten some kind of communication through one of God's messengers. It would also explain why at the account of Legion, Jesus didn't go up to this man and say, hey, are you demon possessed? Because a man might have simply said, well, I don't think I am. I just feel really compelled to run through the cemetery beating people up. May not have known. Jesus didn't do that. He directly confronted the demons that were possessing that man. I hope that what I just told you sounds reasonable, or at least that you'll keep this information in the back of your mind. I promise you, as you're reading the Bible, it'll make a whole lot more sense if you understand this basic Bible teaching. If you don't want to survive, don't listen to me.